Oh, hi! We're in the middle of painting our lanterns. Of course, I am painting on top of completely dry paint so that I can continue to build the layers up. You can see how there's more saturated color around the edges of the lanterns, and so I'm bringing in lighter and less saturated color as we work our way towards the middle. I put this little reference photo of lanterns hanging over here in the corner so you can look at them and study them and really think about the way the light blurs around them and the way light and dark play into each other. Black and white are really interesting colors when it comes to painting because, for example, in the last video I was talking about, or in one of the earlier videos, I was talking about the way crows are not really black. My black cats are not really black. When you look at them closely, there's all kinds of colors going on. So when I go to paint something that I imagine as being black, I don't really use that much or necessarily any black. And the same kind of goes for white. So it's very rare that an artist will use pure white in a painting. Well, I mean, not totally rare. It's really, really fun to hit things with a pure white highlight at the very end, and I might do that a little bit here. We'll see. But especially if you look at the classic art, it's very interesting how much light you can see coming into a painting. And yet, if you took a pure white paint swatch and held it up to a lot of these classical paintings, you would be hard-pressed to find anything in the painting that matches that. And it's because pure white really doesn't happen very much in nature or in the world around us. It's almost always some variation of cream or a warm kind of yellow or a brown, a very, very light brown. So again, when it comes to the interplay between dark and light, if you're trying to get a lot of light in a painting, you almost have to earn it by laying down the darker colors first and watching how they contrast against each other. So what you see me doing here is just adding cream tones, and I'll end up adding probably a bright white at some point. We'll see how it looks. Since clearly I'm not going for total realism here. Not precisely anyways. So for a painting like this, and probably all of the paintings that I do, who knows, I'm basing my choices on how it translates to the painting overall and how it contributes to the mood of the whole thing and the story that it's telling and how I suppose it might make the viewer feel. And you can change the entire mood of the painting, and you can change the whole story just with color choices. It's pretty amazing, actually. So, without going all the way to pure white quite yet, or maybe ever, we'll see, I am lightening and lightening and lightening as we work our way towards the middle of these glowing objects. What if I put another little star right here? Let's try it. Bring some more light into this one. At this point, my brush is probably a little overloaded. The paint might be a little too thick. I'm not doing extremely light marks here. And thus, I did not get the thin, detailed lines that I wanted, which is why I'm removing some paint with the water. Ones. you may be able to tell that this paint is a little thinner than the paint that I was using before that wasn't behaving as I wanted it to. It's not too thick to give me the detailed lines that I want. So again, this is the kind of thing that you figure out with practice, just exactly how thick does the paint need to be. Okay, let's let that dry and go give our moth some attention. Okay, we're building it up with some more saturated greens. I think I'm trying to find some areas where I can add more definition so that we can see our moth a little better. I do notice that when I look at the reference photos for Luna moths, like the one that's over here in the corner, I see the upper wings overlapping the lower wings a little bit, and so you get this little section in between the wings where they're directly overlapping where the color looks a little different. And it's interesting because on the photo, now that I think of it, it looks quite a bit lighter. And that's kind of cool. I think that's because where the wings are translucent, you are seeing the dark foliage come through behind them. So when they're overlapping each other, you can't see that as much, and the wings themselves are actually a good bit lighter. So I don't think that I painted that yet, but at some point, if I remember to, I probably will. Okay, I got us a reference photo for a bandana, and there's the crow again. This is not my cat. This is another picture from Unsplash. I also realized I probably should have been giving credit to the artists who posted their photos on Unsplash, but unfortunately I did not keep detailed records as I was gathering these reference photos, so I'm really sorry for that, and I'll try to do better in the future. But in the meantime, I do know that the photographer who took the picture of this adorable cat is named Cassidy Dickens, and I found this photo on Unsplash. Let's paint some pink fluffy clouds. I love painting clouds. It's so rewarding. I'm gonna start out with my one flat color. It's gonna be pink. Very thin paint for the first layer per usual. And I'm not letting it dry, actually. I'm going to go ahead and pick up some lavender and just kind of splotch it around in there so it's a little blurry and fuzzy. I love painting very organic shapes that have almost no precision whatsoever, and clouds are peak organic shapes with basically no precision. Oh, I'm just going to blot that off with my finger, I guess. I'm not placing this purple randomly. I'm imagining where the shadows and the shading might be. I guess there is a bit of a glare happening here, so it's kind of hard to see where I'm putting the lavender down, and it's fairly subtle. But it's there, I promise. Some of these clouds floating around underneath the bigger cloud have a lot more lavender in them because they'd be a little darker, I imagine. And besides, I can always bring more light in later after they dry or if I want to change it again. Now see, the sketches were a guide, but that doesn't mean we're afraid to freestyle. And once again, here's the reference photo, one of a few reference photos that I drew inspo from for this castle, but thought it might be handy for you to have a castle to look at again while we start working on adding some detail to the castle and the clouds over here. Architecture is honestly not my strong suit. It is like the polar opposite of clouds, not organic. It wants to be kind of precise, and I'm not going to be precise because that's just not my bag, not yet anyways. I could probably get there with a lot more practice because that's the nature of these types of things, but this is where I'm at for now, so I'm just going to do my best. Your castles will probably look better than mine. And that is more than okay with me because even if there's other castles out there that look a lot more precise and a lot more castle-y, she's pretty cute. And she doesn't have to be the best castle in all the land in order to be a very good castle. So I'm just gonna lean into whimsy and hopefully it will at least match with the story that we're trying to tell here, which is a pretty whimsical story if you ask me. Anytime you mix two colors together and you're using mediums, meaning paint or crayons or tangible things that you can mix things with, as opposed to mixing colors with light, which is a whole different story. Anytime you're mixing mediums, the color that results from mixing two or more colors together will always be darker and duller than any of the colors that you used in mixing the new color. And the more colors you mix together, the darker and duller the new color will be. That makes sense, right? And lest the word duller sound like it ought to have a negative connotation, I'm saying, unless it sounds like it should be a bad thing, I want to clarify that dull does not necessarily mean bad in a context like this. We could use another word like muted that sounds a little more neutral. It just means that it's not going to be as bright. It's going to reduce we call it chroma in color theory. And there are many, many cases in which you need a more muted color, so definitely not inherently a bad thing or inherently a good thing. It's just a neutral fact about colors and color mixing. Anyway, all of that to say, look how gloriously dark this paint got when I mixed it all together. And since I have added less water, it is thicker paint, and so it's going on very opaque, and we're bringing more depth to our dragon with an even darker value. We just keep on making it darker in some places and lighter in others. I just keep saying it over and over, but that's really what we're doing. It's repetitious. It just keeps building on itself again and again. I'm going under the scales again because there would always be a shadow underneath the scales if the scales are raised ever so slightly. And I like that when I add some darkness under there, it makes the scales appear as if they are raised a little bit. Oh, and yes, in an earlier video I was mixing magenta with that blue, and I have figured out by now that I did need a much more scarlet red to make it more like the kind of purple that I'm aiming for. If he were in the daylight, he would probably be pretty maroon, pretty red looking, reddish dragon. Okay, and then we'll give our dragon a rest so he can get a chance to dry, and we'll go back to our crow and keep on building up his darker values again. And very handy, we can just pull from the exact same color and the exact same paint that we were using on the dragon. Also, this is probably a good time to mention that the way that color works changes depending on the context that it's in. You might notice that this paint is the exact same paint we were just using on the dragon, but it does look a little different on the crow since it's surrounded by blue instead of being surrounded by so much purple. And I have defined his tail feathers, and now I'm giving more shadow to those funny little backwards crow knees. I mean, crow's knees. Sounded like I said cronies, like my cronies, my partners in crime. Although a crow kind of is a partner in crime, so okay, it all works. Well, a crow is a good partner in crime if you're good to them. Otherwise, you will be the victim of crow crimes for many a crow generation. Oh, also I added some darker tones around where his bandana is sitting because there would be some shading and a shadow there because there's a bandana there. Okay, so at this point y'all probably know exactly what I'm doing. Just continuing to define where his feathers are and all of that stuff. So while I'm doing this, I'm going to tell you a little bit of crow lore, just in case you've never heard it. Because there have actually been studies done, you guys. There have been studies done on how crows hold a grudge, and they do the opposite of holding a grudge too. So if you help a crow and you're benevolent to crows and they notice you, they will bring you trinkets. They will tell their families, for generations of crows, they will tell the other crows that this human did a good thing. And the crows will bring you things, and the crows will love you forever. And if you are mean to a crow, it's the exact same story. And there were studies that were done. There's articles that have been written on this. You can find them online. It's a blast to read. It's so silly and weird and fun. There was even one wild story I read about a man who had to move out of his home and go live somewhere else because he offended a crow somehow. And the crow figured out his bus route and knew which bus he was getting off of on his way home, and it would follow him all the way home off the bus, just harassing him and like pelting him with things. And I need to deeply apologize for my terrible sense of humor because I think this is absolutely hilarious. I do feel terrible for this guy. I hate it for him, but crows are really smart, and whatever he did to offend him, probably shouldn't have done that. Oh, take note here. Of course, I'm blocking the paint with my hand. I'm so sorry. I have realized that I need to pay closer attention to exactly how I'm holding the brush so y'all can even see what I'm doing. So I'll try to do better on that next time. But in the meantime, you can take note of the consistency of the paint in that little palette that I'm holding because it is just thick enough and just thin enough, and it's working. My brush is managing to do the smaller details that I want it to do, so just in case that helps to see, because there's very, very fine lines here. And again, if you get frustrated with these kinds of lines, just don't even worry about it. You don't need them. In order to have a painting that still looks really cool and still looks like a crow and still looks like a dragon, just you gotta embrace your inner impressionist. Don't forget about Matisse and Monet and Renoir. I am giving my crow a very tiny, I almost said black, but it's not actually black. It's just very, very dark purple, but a very dark little spot for his eye there. And later, we will be building that up more and probably putting some very, very tiny, teeny tiny little dots and specks of light in his eyes to give him some personality. I am not sure at this point whether I'm going to be doing that with gouache or if I might just come in with a gel pen, probably a white gel pen, and just doing a tiny, tiny little dot because it is so little. It could be very frustrating to try to do that with a brush. Another option is I might use something like a toothpick just to give the teeniest, tiniest little dot, and if I do that, I'll show you how I do it. But either way, we're not doing it yet, so we just keep building what we need to build for now. And for now, we are pulling different blues to add to our crow. And we're going to do lighter blues where the light is hitting and darker blues where the light is less. It's pretty intuitive if you look where the lights are. Of course, the top of his head is going to be much lighter than like underneath his tail because the lights are shining on the top of his head, and we will be pulling in more colors because it will be light. Like there will be light on his head, there will be highlights, but we're not to that yet. It takes a while to get there. Itty bitty little light touches for his extremely tiny little beak. And I would say that if you are struggling to get the lines there, and in a situation like this where there's a beak, and if you want it thin and you're struggling to get those fine lines, I would just throw down some paint. I mean, still gently, do your best. But if it's not as thin as you want, then you can just go back and get some of this blue that you used for the night sky, and you can paint over the parts of the beak that you wish had stayed in the lines, and it will be as if it had stayed in the lines. Here I am even just taking some water to reactivate that blue sky paint, and pushing it around the beak to even out some of those details that didn't go exactly how I wanted. Oh, and here's our bandana cat again because we're going to work on the bandana some more now that it's had some time to dry. Also, you may notice that the bandana on the cat is not in the same position as the bandana on the crow. So I would say to that, I'm so sorry. I couldn't find anything on Unsplash or Pexels that was in the exact position that we wanted. However, it is still handy to have a reference photo of a bandana to look at because the way that it folds and the different shadows that we see will inform us about where we need to put some folds and some shadows on our crow. We just have to pull from our imagination a little bit, and that's okay. That's part of the magic of it. You're going to have to look really closely while I'm doing all this detail work, but right now I'm adding some light to the bandana to show us where we've got folds that are creased outward. So much of what we're doing with the light and the dark just puts dimension on our work. Because when I add light, it by nature creates patches that are darker than the light. So you're going to start to see some folds developing on something like a bandana. Just like adding light to scales implies that there's darkness under them, and then you can come in and put more intentionally darker paint where the darkness seems to be already implied, or you can choose not to, and those are all different creative choices. But when you add the light, it starts to show you where the dark should be, and when you add the dark, it starts to show you where the light should be. And of course it's going to be darker on this book where the crow is standing because there's not going to be any light reaching underneath his feet, and there's going to be a little bit of light reaching under where his body is, but not as much as where there's no shadow being cast, of course. over the tree again. We gotta keep making it darker. Of course, I went for a slightly thicker slash bigger brush because I'm painting bigger spaces than when I was painting the crow or the dragon. Okay, since I'm just going to be filling this in for a while and I think you get it, I'll just tell you a little something about pigeons that I learned the other day because I'm sure you're dying to know. So we domesticated pigeons thousands of years ago, and of course we all know that they used to carry messages for us, and they had all kinds of jobs, and then one day we didn't need them anymore, so what happened? We abandoned them, and they're all in the cities, and people call them flying rats or whatever, it's a whole thing. But I recently learned that legally, they are not considered wildlife. They are considered domestic animals. Well, technically they're feral, kind of like feral cats that are wandering around cities. They're domestic animals, they're not wild. So while many birds are protected under wildlife laws that say you can't keep them, even if you find them injured, even if a wildlife rehabber won't take them, just whatever, you're not allowed. But pigeons are technically domestic animals, and legally, I mean, obviously check me on this, but I'm pretty sure it's true. Legally, if you want a pigeon, all you have to do is catch one, take it to the vet so that it can check and make sure it doesn't have any weird diseases and it can treat it for whatever problems it might have. And then boom, free pigeon. That's how you get a pigeon. You just go get one and they're domesticated. And the crazy thing about pigeons is that truly they were so domesticated that they live way longer and better in captivity than they do in the wild. Many, many more years. I am paying attention to where there would be some shading on this tree and where some spots might be a little bit lighter. Not like a ton lighter, but just a little bit lighter. So I'm not filling it all in to the exact same degree here. Alright, I'm going to get some purple paint and you're going to see me apply it to the palette and then kind of twirl my brush around in it a little bit. That kind of helps bring the point back to the end of the brush so that it can keep on doing the detail work that I want it to do. I'm trying to work up to painting the dragon's eye just a little bit, kind of like I did the crow. And I get really in my head about painting eyes because they're just like, they're so important. It's still just a painting. It's still not that serious. But the eyes they have so much expression in them. And so it's funny because I'm not even like doing the whole thing yet. I'm just doing what I did with the crow. And I'm trying to paint the nostril and his face a little bit. These are all like little teeny tiny details. So that's why I was spending so much time fussing with the brush. I imagine there would be a little bit of a shadow under the dragon's, it's kind of like a beak, I guess, in the same way that there's a bit of a shadow under the crow's beak, like the top part of his beak. And then of course there would be a shadow under his chin and more shadows under his scales. I just keep on adding more and more shadows, shading, whatever. Gonna try to help these dragon wings lean a little bluer. And now that the books that I painted had a chance to dry, I can paint the ones that I skipped. And I'm sure you don't need this reminder, but of course we're painting lean again. Very thin paint since it's the first layer. And the edges were really bugging me. I think that there was too much blue on that purple book bleeding over, so I washed the brush and I dried it off, and I'm just using it to pick that pigment back up and remove it, kind of like erasing. It's also kind of funny to me as I watch this back because it's good that I did that because it'll help me see as I continue to add layers where exactly I wanted the books to be. But if not for that, there's really not much of a point to all of that tidying that I was doing, because I am going to come back. You've already seen how many layers we've painted over the crow and the dragon, and how the layers of paint just keep coming and coming. So I would just, be painting over that with paint that was thicker later and therefore less runny. So it's kind of funny, but this is just like a painter habit, I guess, that I have developed. Some of the things that I do to help me be able to see what I was planning to do are helpful even for the sake of remembering, because we have to stop and let things dry so frequently, and because mostly no one's really gonna sit down and just do a painting like this all in one sitting. That's a surefire way to go mad. So it does help to have things outlined so that you can see clearly where you were when you return to pick it back up again. Take note how thin this paint is. Just look at it really closely because you can see it so well. The way it moves even. It's so thin. It's great. It's a great first layer. Also, I would like to draw your attention to, again, the paint in the dish as I mix it so that you can become more familiar with the different consistencies and the way they look on the palette. Oh. Now this particular video is a pretty long one, so if you want to pause this here and take a break for a while, a day or two, and come back later and keep working on it, I mean, do that anytime you ever want to, ever, forever, but I just wanted to suggest it because we still have a good bit more time, and it's already been a minute. The color I chose for that book is very close to the night sky color, apparently, and it is blending in. So that's something I'm going to have to make a mental note about to come back to and give it some more distinctive lines and such to distinguish it from the background. go ahead and make the background even darker. The darker the background, the more contrast we've got, the more the lights show, the more things stand out in the foreground. Can't hurt to make it a little darker. You might notice that I went right up to the edge of the crow, and I wasn't really too careful about putting the line right up against it. It's really okay if there's a little bit of space. It's not totally precise, just it's a sky, you know? You can also really see here how the gouache dries. Did you see where it dried? It just flipped there between the cuts or whatever, because I walked away and let it dry for a while. But it dries just a little bit lighter than it looks when it goes down initially. And here I'm just kind of messing around trying to get a good color for the book pages, because I don't want them to be white. They would have a lot of shadow on them, and they'll probably have some light on them too, but I want to start with filling them in with a color that's a little darker so I can come in with highlights later. And by darker, I mean darker than white. So we're aiming for something a little creamy, a little brownish, a little tannish, a little bit of yellow. That yellow that I pulled from that looks almost tan, brownish, that's a yellow ochre. It's a very, very handy color indeed. To grab some brown anyway, just a tiny dot of it. And look how far one tiny dot goes of brown, of a very dark color and a very light color. It's going to be really overpowering. But this seems pretty okay. I'm using it to add some darkness, some shading, some shadow. I'm not imagining that I'm going to leave the pages like this. I'm kind of aiming for the color that I imagine between the pages, because then if I come back over it with a much lighter color, then it will look like we've got some pages happening. So this is contributing to something that a lot of artists would call the ugly stage of a painting. We get to an ugly stage when the lighter colors are not there yet. I mean, this is just one example. There's lots of examples of an ugly stage of a painting, and I wouldn't say that this is totally an ugly stage, but there's ugly elements because the vision is not complete. It's not there yet, and there's a lot of murky muddiness going on, but it's intentional, and it's going to look weird until we add the other things that we're planning to add. Time to paint some mushrooms. So I modeled these mushrooms after chanterelles. So we get to pull in some really lovely oranges, and that makes my harmony loving heart very happy because we've got so much orange up there in the moon. So we've really got to pull some in to both of these other circles, in my opinion, and I know exactly where I'm going to put it, so we'll start with some chanterelles. And then later we'll get a little bit of orange in the bottom circle when we start doing the windows on the castle and making them glow a little bit too. We'll get to have some orange there. I'm not worrying too much about avoiding the teacups. I just don't want to forget where they were, so I'm not painting completely over them, but not being very careful around those lines because, as always, we're just going to paint over the paint that we need to paint over when we get to it. Brace yourself for a confusing little jump cut because you're going to see my paintbrush show up suddenly with white on it, and I'm going to add some white to the moon. Do not be alarmed, I definitely washed my paintbrush off so much before I put white on it. That would have been crazy. It would have been totally orange if I didn't do that, so just wanted to let you know it. I accidentally cut that out, I guess. But here I was trying really hard to make my moon look more glowy by adding more light, and I didn't realize yet that what I really need to do is put more darkness around it. That's why it wasn't looking right. I was like, just add more white to it. Why isn't it working? It needs more dark, that's why. So here I am figuring that out and deciding to finally fix this. Too thick, we need more water. We must make it thinner. We must make it more easy to manipulate the paint. The way my whole body relaxed when I put this darker, and then I had to make it even darker immediately. I was just like, we are not doing this light on light on light on light. We must have more contrast. Oh my goodness. It's hilarious to me how emotional this can be. Also, the moon kind of looks like a banana, but we take the wins where we can get them. And that's okay, I can like my little banana moon. She's a cute banana moon. Must make bottommost circle darker as well. You get higher contrast, and you get higher contrast, and you get higher contrast. Free contrast for everyone. Now see, if any of y'all are bummed out because you lost one of your creatures underneath the paint, just look at that sad little blue butterfly up there by the moon. He is so lost. That's okay, we'll recover him. But for now, he's kind of a blob. Okay, seems like a good time to finally stop. I know this was a really long one. My clips got a little bit jumbled and I had to come unjumble them, and I just could not cut it in half and re-upload and whatever. So you get an hour-long video this time. Thank you so much for hanging out. See you next time.